Okay. Okay, so my name is David Hilbert, and I'm going to give you a brief introduction to Zoho Motivator, including a demo. What I usually do is I start out with just a few slides to introduce Motivator and how it works, and then jump right into the demo. And typically when I do this demo, I'm very happy to take questions as we go, so please just ask away, and we can make it very interactive. Okay, so I want to start by just explaining that Motivator is essentially an application that runs as a layer on top of CRM, on top of Zoho CRM. So all of the data that's in Motivator and all of the users that are in Motivator are all coming from your CRM system. And Motivator runs on top of that, creates an interesting and more engaging competitive environment to help keep the sales team engaged and performing their best. And the way that Motivator does this is it combines two key elements, analytics and gamification. So the first step is analytics. And the idea here is that Motivator allows you to set up a few key metrics that you want to track in your sales process. Anything that's important to track to ensure that your performance is going as planned. And then the manager can keep track of all this, and when they notice that there's some issues, with a few clicks, Motivator allows the manager to create a couple of different ways to engage the team to perform better. So the first way is what we call sales contests. And the sales contest is essentially setting up some kind of behavior or some kind of metric that you want your team to improve, and then creating this leaderboard. And these leaderboards can run on large screen TVs that you might set up in your sales office or on the sales floor, maybe in a break room, anywhere where it's very visible to your sales team. The idea is to boost the visibility for this particular metric you're trying to improve and provide recognition for people who are performing well. And people typically will compete to try to be on the top of the leaderboard. But that's really just one half of the picture for the gamification. The other half is this thing that we call personalized scorecards. And the idea behind scorecards is that there are certain activities that you just want the sales team to be performing on a regular basis, like daily phone calls or weekly meetings set up. And so the manager can use Motivator to set some targets for the team. And then once he's done that, everyone on the team gets this personalized scorecard. And the personalized scorecard just gives you a quick at-a-glance status on whether you're on track or off track to meet your targets. And we'll get into that more in the demo. And the idea behind Motivator is that by using the analytics combined with the gamification, we're helping you boost the sales. And even though Motivator is a brand new application for Zoho CRM, very similar approaches have been used to gamify sales in other CRM ecosystems. And there are numerous well-documented case studies that show that even in very short periods of time, like maybe 6 to 8 weeks, you might be able to boost your sales by 200%. So it's a very, very powerful approach to improving sales performance. Okay, that's basically the high-level overview. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is this factory metaphor. So I was recently talking to a veteran sales VP and also a consultant who helps other companies set up their sales process. And he had this quote that I thought was really interesting. He said, "Sales is a factory for shipping revenue." And what he meant by that is that you can structure your sales process in such a way that you can track the key data that indicates how performance is going, and you can continually optimize those metrics to improve the performance, much like factories are tracking production and continually optimizing the process to produce more. So with that in mind, I wanted to talk about how we use Motivator to support this process. It's basically a 3-step process. So it begins with setting up your key performance indicators, or KPIs, otherwise just known as key metrics. So this depends on your sales process. In some processes, it might be how many prospecting calls you make, how many meetings are set up, leads that are created, potentials created, maybe even revenue that's booked for the month. Then the next step is to set goals for your key activities. So those activities in your sales process that lead to sales. So again, that might be prospecting calls, or it might be setting up meetings, and then everyone gets these scorecards that we talked about to make sure that the team is just on track to those key activities that will lead to more sales. And then finally, we have the contests that we talked about. And there's a couple different ways that people do this. So some customers actually will set up a contest every once in a while. There will be prizes, and it'll be kind of a big, exciting event to try to really boost the energy and spike the performance. There are other customers that use Motivator to kind of really just increase the visibility of this key metric they want everyone focused on. They might not even put prizes in there. They might just show the leaderboards up in a public place in the sales office, just to make sure that people are staying on track and doing their best with regard to the key activities the sales manager wants. And when we go into the demo, we can talk about other ways to do this. So those are the three main steps in using Motivator. And before we jump into the demo, the last thing I wanted to do was drill down just a little bit more into that middle step, setting goals for key sales activities. So it's possible that some of our customers are already doing a process like this, but for those who haven't done this before, this is just kind of an overview of how you do it. So you start out with what is your end goal in terms of sales, say for the quarter. Let's say you wanted to book $1 million in sales this quarter. Now what you do next is you look at your historical data, and you should be able to work backwards from that end goal to the key activities or the key intermediate goals that will get you to your ultimate goal. So let's say that on average your deal size is 10,000. That means that you need 100 deals. In order to get 100 deals, you may know from historical data that you typically have to get at least 3 opportunities for every good deal. That means that one intermediate goal is to create 300 opportunities. So you just continue working backwards in this fashion. Let's say it takes 90 calls for every opportunity. Now you know that you've got to get 27,000 calls for this quarter. But you don't stop there. The next thing you do is you look at how many days you have in the quarter. Say it's 66. Now you know how many calls per day you need to make. Let's say you have 10 people on your team. So now you know that each rep is responsible for getting 40 calls on average. And so that's just basically the process of working from your ultimate goals back to the key activities that you want to set as targets for your team. And then once you do that, Motivator can then help keep your team on track to meeting those targets, and you know those targets will lead to the ultimate sales that you want. And with that, I think it's a good time to jump into the demo. Oops. I'm just going to zoom in on the Motivator window now. Okay, so what you're seeing here is the home screen for Motivator. Over here on the left is the navigation pane. Sorry, I'm pausing because I'm wondering if the screen is looking okay. Arun, is everything looking okay, or is it kind of going black every once in a while?
It's looking. I mean, it went black once or twice, but now it's looking okay.
I see. It's up to you, but it might be safer to go back to the full screen mode, and I don't know if you can crop it afterwards. I remember during the webinar we had the same problem where it just kept flicking to black.
Okay. I mean, for now, probably you can go back to the regular mode and we can adjust
Okay,
the video.
all right. I think it might be safer because it's going to be distracting if it's jumping to black, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to start over from the demo.
Okay.
Okay, so what you're seeing here is the home screen for Motivator, and over on the left we have the navigation pane. So currently selected is home, and the home screen basically gives you a snapshot overview of some of the key metrics across the top here, or KPIs, that you're tracking for your sales process. In the middle, you can see the scorecards for any targets that you've set for your team. And down at the bottom, you can see a summary of any contests that are currently running at this time. And I just want to recall that, again, this is Motivator running on top of Zoho CRM, so all of the data you're seeing here and all of the users that are involved in the contests and the targets are basically coming out of the CRM system. And a little bit later, we can show you how to set up your users. But now that you've seen the home screen, I want to show some more of the functionality around the KPIs. So the KPIs that are shown here at the top are actually the first 4 KPIs from your default KPI dashboard. So I'm going to click over here on dashboards. And as you can see, there's a few different dashboards, but we'll start by looking at the default KPIs. So when you start using Motivator for the very first time, there are a few KPIs that are already defined for you. Guys, I'm going to remove this one because it's not one of the ones that's usually there. Sorry about that. So it doesn't really matter, but if you wanted to edit, I'm just going to restart on the default KPIs. So when you go to the default KPIs dashboard for the first time, you'll see that there are a few KPIs that are already defined for you. That's the leads created, the potentials created, the sales won, the sales lost, and the revenue generated. And you can configure these to match your sales process, or you can add and remove KPIs, and I'll show you how to do that. Why don't we start by adding a new KPI? So over here at the top, next to the title of the dashboard, you see something that says Add KPI. And if I click on the drop-down, you'll see that there's the ability to quickly add a metric associated with any of the modules in CRM, which is essentially just counting new accounts, new calls, new campaigns, or you can define one from scratch by clicking here on New KPI. So I'm going to do that. So the first step in defining a metric is to pick the module. So I'm going to click on here and I'm going to say, let's track calls, for example. The next step is just to confirm that the ways that the rules for assigning points look right. So right now it's assigning 1 point for every record that you create, call record. The records to be counted in the period must be created during that period. And for a participant to receive points for that record, they must be the creator of that record. In some cases, our customers have systems that create these records for them, but then assign ownership. So I'm going to change this to own the record. So anyone who owns the call record will then receive points for it. And then down at the bottom, there are some additional rules that you can use to create more filters on which records you actually want to count. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So now I'm going to go to the next step. I'm going to give this a name. Let's call it calls. Now you get the review screen, which just lets you review that everything looks good. And when I save this, it's going to add it to the default dashboard. So it's been added here at the bottom position. And then I want to show you how you can reorganize your dashboard. If you go up here to the top, next to the Add KPI, there's something called Configure. And if you click here, you can show or hide any KPIs that have already been defined in the system, and you can reorder them by just dragging them around. So I'm going to put the calls in the first position. Okay. So now when I go back to the home screen, you can see that the calls have popped up here in the first position. So before we get into setting targets or creating contests, I just wanted to show another feature which we call peer comparison. So for any of the metrics that you're tracking, any user can go and click on this number sign, and what that will show you is, which of the users in your CRM org is in first, second, and third place in terms of that metric, and where do you rank in that? And this is just another way of keeping people sort of engaged and doing their best to come to the top of the list. Okay. So now I'd like to show how to create targets. So again, I'm going to click on this little three-dot menu item here. We call this the action menu. This is what lets you edit or set targets or create contests. And I'm going to say, let's set targets. So the first step in setting a target is picking the period. It can be daily, weekly, monthly, or whatever. I'm going to say monthly in this case. Going to the next step here. And this is where you can set targets for the company as a whole, or you can break it down based on teams that you've defined in Motivator, and we'll talk about that more detail later. And then you can also set targets for individuals. So let's say we wanted the target here to be 45. Let's say we want the West Coast team to get 20, and we want the East Coast team to get 25 because they're a stronger team in general in terms of phone calls. Once you're ready to save, you can notify the people in your company that there's a new target that's been set. I'm going to hit save. And now what you see here is the scorecard that we talked about. So the 45 target for the company, we're 28, so we're more or less on track. We're seeing a yellow bar here because we're just slightly behind what would be considered on track. Then if we look at the leads created by the East Coast team, they're a little bit behind, so they're seeing a red bar. Whereas the West Coast team is doing just fine to meet their targets, so they're getting a green bar. So again, this is the concept of a scorecard, and your team members can even see this on their mobile device. So at any time, they can just pull out their mobile and see how they're doing on their daily targets or their weekly targets or their monthly targets. And another thing I wanted to draw your attention to is that the notification for that target popped up here in this notification area. So this is where your users can see that there are new targets created or contests created or other kinds of notifications. But of course, most users are operating primarily in Zoho's CRM. So those same targets will show up in here in CRM for the users. It doesn't show up for me as a manager because I created it and I don't need to see that notification. But the other users will see it here, as well as in the feeds. Okay. So now I want to go back and I want to show you another feature that's sort of interesting. It's the ability to drill down and see more data behind the metrics that you're tracking. So let's say we wanted to get more context on the leads created. So if I click here, I can see trend data. This is showing the leads that were created over this past month, and I can change the period as well. I'm going to look at, let's say, the previous month. And then another thing that you can do that's interesting is you can break down the data in various ways. So up here at the top, there's something called view, and I can break this down by the teams defined in Motivator. So this is showing leads created by my West Coast team versus my East Coast team. You can break it down by employee, and this gives you the ability to see how each of your salespeople are doing and perhaps an opportunity for finding reps that might need some coaching. And then finally, for any field that in the CRM record that's sort of like a choice field or a select field, we can also break down that way as well. So let's say we wanted to break down by industry. So these are the leads coming in from different industry segments. And one of the interesting things that you can do with this is you can figure out, do you have a proper balance? So let's say you're trying to hit your target for this quarter, and it looks like you're low on leads from the service provider industry, but you know from past performance that you typically do well with service provider customers. Your close times are fast, and the deal sizes are good. So one way to improve the performance is to create a contest that motivates your team to create more leads from this particular industry segment. So I think that's a good time to jump back and talk about creating contests. So in order to create a contest, we click on this action menu once again, and we just select the item that says Create Contest. And by default, Motivator creates a contest with a few default parameters set up. Basically, it's assigning 1 point for every lead record that's created. The participants are everyone in the company, and it's going to run for a week or two. And just as a rule of thumb, if you're trying to create a contest to really boost energy, short contests are a good idea because the longer ones tend to, people get worn down and they don't necessarily keep up the energy the whole time. So short contests are a good way to go. But as I mentioned before, another way to use contests is just to create a leaderboard that you want to track for a month. In that case, you might want to make it a month duration. So there are multiple different ways you might want to do this. But before I save this, I want to make a few changes. So I'm going to click on this behavior here. And by the way, over on the left-hand side, these are all the steps in defining a contest. So you can also go to the steps over here. In fact, why don't I do that? I'll go here and I'll start at the type to show you that we have a couple different types of contests. So you can have a contest between individuals. You can have a contest between teams. You can also have a contest that includes a goal, meaning individuals or teams are keep competing, but overall you want everyone to reach a certain goal, and that contest will show the progress towards the goal. So I'm just going to leave this as a contest between individuals. We go to the next step, which is the behaviors. So this is where I want to customize this lead rule. So as I mentioned, down here at the bottom we have these custom rules. So for any field in the lead record, I can actually add some filtering rules. So I'm going to go to the industry, and I'm going to pick an operation that is equals, and I'm going to say I want the industry to equal, what do we say, service providers. So as I showed you before, we wanted to create more leads from the service provider industry, and this rule here is essentially a filter that filters which records are pulled out of your CRM and then assigned to points for this contest. So I'm going to save this behavior and go to the next. So this is where you assign the participants. In this case, everyone in the company is included, but you can also just add people from teams or put individuals in here if you don't want everyone involved. I'm just going to go next. This is where you can define observers. So the concept of an observer is anyone in the company that you would like to receive notifications about the contest, but who are not actually participating in the contest themselves. So maybe a manager or the CEO, you'd like them to see how the contest is going. You can add them in here. This is an area where you can put prizes. As I mentioned, sometimes just having a leaderboard is motivating enough, but adding prizes can make things a little more fun. So I'm just going to add some prizes that I've added in the past. And a prize is essentially just a name or title for your prize and some value. So you can put anything in here you want, and then these items will show up on the leaderboards that you show on the TV screen. Okay. This is the duration of the contest. I'm going to move the duration into the past because for demo purposes, I would like you to see some actual points on the leaderboard and data on our charts. So that's the reason I'm putting it in the past. Typically, you would start a contest in the future. These are the notifications. So right now the notifications include an announcement the day before the contest starts, so making sure everyone knows that the contest is starting, this is what it's about, and getting everyone ready. And then we also have what we call home stretch announcements, which means as the contest is drawing towards a close, a message will go out saying, hey, you have so-and-so number of days left in this contest, you're currently in this position, and here are the other people who are in the top 3 positions. And then for those last few days, for the people who are in the top 3 positions, if they will receive additional updates if they get knocked out of one of their positions. So let's say you're in first position and you get knocked down to second, you'll get a notification from Motivator letting you know that. And again, it's just different kinds of ways to keep the team really engaged and doing their best to try to maximize this behavior. Okay, this is where we can change the title. So I'm going to call this Service Provider Leads because we just created a contest that is assigning points for leads created from that particular industry segment. And this is the review screen. I can review everything here. And again, this will notify everyone that I've created this contest if I want to do that. And I will do that. I'm going to save it. So now once you've created the contest, Motivator does all the work behind the scenes to create this leaderboard and to update the points. And all this happens more or less in real time. So when a new record is created, it will show up on the points will show up on the leaderboard within a few seconds. We have some performance charting here that lets you see how the top 3 performers are doing. And I'm logged in as Morris Green, and I can actually compare my performance to anyone I want by just clicking on them. So this is my performance compared to Emma's performance. And then down here at the bottom, we have what we call the audit area. So as a manager, I will see this, and I will be able to just check that all of the records that are being created and assign points for this contest look okay. So clicking on that just shows me the record in the CRM, and I can confirm that everything looks good and that there aren't duplicates and so forth. So this is a nice way to see the contest and understand what's going on if you're logged in on your computer or on a desktop, for example. But I think the most interesting way to look at contests is on TV channels. And this is what we referred to before, and I'm going to show you how that works now. So I'm going to close up these. And over here at the bottom, we have something called TV channels. If I click on this, you'll see that there are a few different default channels that are defined. And one of them is the contest channel. The contest channel just shows me any contests that are currently running right now. So I'm going to click on that. And I'm getting a preview here of a contest that I previously created called Prospecting Calls. And so what you're seeing is this leaderboard of the people who are getting the most points in terms of creating calls and some, showcasing of the different leaders to give you a sense of how they're performing. Over on the right, there's a time remaining to give people a sense of how much time is left and the prizes that are available. And this is the Service Provider Leads contest that we just created. But another feature I wanted to show you that's interesting is custom channels. So down below here, we have one called My TV Channel, and I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to manage that. Remove that. So in a custom channel, you're able to add any combination of different types of data that you want to add. So let's say, for example, you just have one key metric that you want everyone focused on, and you would like them to be seeing the progress on that metric. So let's say it's revenue generated. I'll click on that. And it's showing that on a monthly basis. I can also add targets. So we created that target for lead creation for the company. I'll add that as well. And then I'll also add a contest. I'm going to add the Service Provider Leads contest. And then, much like you saw before, you can actually reorder just by dragging these things around. So now it's going to show the KPI first, the target, and then the contest. Down below, you can also add announcements, and there's a ticker area at the bottom of the screen that show these announcements, and I'll show you that in the preview. So once you've made the changes you want, you can save all of this. And now you're seeing a preview here that's showing the revenue generated KPI. It's showing that it's decreased since the same period last month. This is what it looks like when you put a target. So it's just showing your progress towards the target and whether you're on track or not. And then finally, this is the contest that we talked about. So once again, the idea is to use the TV to really boost the visibility of these key metrics or targets or contests that you want everyone to be focused on. And it really is a good way to energize and engage the team. Most salespeople tend to be pretty competitive, and they like to see themselves at the top of the board. So that's the power behind these TV leaderboards. Okay. In a moment, we're going to jump into the settings, but before we do that, I just wanted to point out that we have a couple other dashboards I haven't shown yet. So the default KPIs dashboard we talked about a little bit, and you can create custom dashboards much like this one. In fact, I'll look at that first. And just like we talked about before, you can just add KPIs either from here, or you can go to the configure screen and you can add KPIs from here. Once you've done that, you can actually take this dashboard and you can share this with particular people in the team. So right now it's shared with everyone in the company, but we could actually restrict that to be just the West Coast team and perhaps myself. And that's a way of, So that's a way of then sharing this dashboard with specific people. And then here, just below the default KPIs, we have a couple of more advanced dashboards. One is called the pipeline velocity. This is basically an index metric to show you how opportunities are moving through your pipeline towards becoming closed deals. The pipeline velocity index value is sort of like a stock index. The idea is that you'd like to see that moving, steadily and hopefully moving upward as opposed to moving downward, and it just gives you a sense of the health of your overall pipeline. This number here is more or less looking at how many dollars are moving through on a monthly basis. And the way it's computed is basically by looking at your open potentials, multiplying that by your win rate, multiplying that by your deal size, and dividing everything by your sales cycle. So if you start to see this dipping down, it indicates that you need to look at ways to either boost your open potentials, win rate, or deal size, or perhaps reduce your sales cycle. So you can set up targets or set up contests to try to do that. And then finally, we have a pipeline stages dashboard. And this dashboard just gives you a sense of where the opportunities are being closed out at different stages throughout your pipeline, and what the conversion rates from one stage to the next stage are. Okay, so with that, I think it's a good time to jump into the setup. So I'm clicking on this menu here on the top right, and I'm going to click on settings. And what you're seeing here are all the users that are in your CRM org. So when you first log into Motivator as the admin, you would want to come in here and you'd want to activate any users from your CRM org that you would like to participate either in targets or in contests. And also who you'd like to see in those breakdowns. When you do a breakdown of data, you can see it broken down by employee. And for all those people, you require them to be activated in here. So just to clarify, you don't necessarily need to buy licenses for all your CRM users. You just need the licenses for the people who are going to participate in contests, targets, and these data breakdowns. Earlier I referred to teams. So right now, Motivator has its own set of teams, and you can add teams and create teams here and assign the different people. In the near future, we'll also be adding the ability to take groups that were defined in CRM and make those appear as teams in Motivator. And then the last thing I want to talk about is the CRM sync. So the first person who logs into Motivator needs to be a CRM admin, and then we'll use that person's security token to fetch all the data and sync it into Motivator. And the very first time that happens, it may take a few minutes depending on how much data is in your CRM system. But subsequently, after that, once the initial bulk sync is done, updates in the future will happen very quickly on a real-time basis. The reason I'm showing this is because we use that sync token from the first person logged in. If for some reason that person leaves the company later, then another admin can log in to Motivator, come to the CRM sync here, and just click on this button in order to update the token to use their token. Another thing I wanted to point out is that Motivator does support all the standard modules in CRM and also custom modules and custom fields. And the very first time that the sync happens, it gets all of the information about all the custom modules and fields. If in the future you add more custom modules or more custom fields, you should come into Motivator and either just update the field information or perhaps even perform a full resync. So I think that's all I had to show in terms of the demo. So now I'm going to switch back to the slides. So now we can talk a little bit about pricing and plans. So there's a free plan for Motivator, and that's good for up to 5 users, and there's no limit on using that plan in terms of time. But it does have some limitations in terms of the features. So the dashboards we talked about in the free plan are always public, meaning there's no access control. The scorecards that we talked about only apply for companies. So if you want to break down targets to your team or to your individuals, then you need to move into one of the paid plans. You can run one contest at a time, and you've got one custom TV channel. So as you get into the paid plans, essentially they're all the same features across all these different plans. They're sold as user packs. So if you want to get 5 user pack, it comes out to $12 per user per month. If you go with a 10 user pack, it comes out to $10 per user per month. And the number of users, the price per user essentially goes down as the number of users goes up. If you need some intermediate number, let's say you have 7 users, you can buy the 5 user pack, and then for an additional $15 per user per month, you can add a couple users. And at some point, it becomes more effective just to jump into the next pack, more efficient. But the store will tell you that. So if you're trying to pick a number of users and add them to the 5 user pack, and it's better to be in the 10 user pack, the store will tell you that. So the difference in the paid plans is that you have access control over the dashboard, so you can share those selectively with different individuals or teams. You can set targets and scorecards for teams and individuals, and as I mentioned, you can have unlimited contests and unlimited custom TV channels. One other point I'd like to make here, just to make sure it's clear, is that we do offer a free trial for the paid plans, and whichever one you pick, you can actually do a free trial with unlimited number of users. So you don't need to worry about that. Let's say you have more than 25 users and you want to do a trial, just click any of the trial buttons and you'll get a trial for everyone. Another point I'd like to make here is that if you have more than 25 users, you may want to contact the sales team and they may be able to do custom pricing for you. Again, if you're well over 25 users, you may be able to get better pricing, $8 per user per month. Okay, so now I'm just going to recap the key points about Motivator. So there are 3 key features. The first is the dashboards and analytics, and this helps bring new insights for improving your sales performance. There's the targets and scorecards, which help you promote winning sales behaviors that lead to more sales. And finally, the contests and the TV leaderboards, which help you engage the sales reps and motivate them to perform their best. And the goal is to increase revenue and also boost the engagement. It can make sales a little bit more fun for the team. So that's all I had to present in terms of the presentation, but when I do this presentation for customers, there are a few other slides I have as backup that we can also share with partners. Did I say partners? When we're doing demos for partners, we might want to share some of these slides. So if the question of competition comes up, for Zoho customers, there's really no competition at this time. There's nothing that offers the kinds of features that Motivator does with the deep integration that Motivator provides. For customers who are evaluating Zoho or converting from Salesforce, I like to point out that Salesforce doesn't offer its own solution. So in other words, someone would have to buy the Salesforce license and then also purchase a license from some third-party provider. So there's some third-party providers of similar solutions, but they're also very expensive. So if we go down here at the bottom, the advantages for Motivator versus Salesforce and some third-party solution is there is more advanced functionality. We're the only gamification provider that combines this analytics with, what we call one-click gamification. So tracking your performance with a couple clicks, convert it right into a contest. Also, we offer very tight integration with the CRM because it's a Zoho product, so it works very seamlessly. And the bottom line is it's a much better value. It can be less than half the cost of going with Salesforce. That's because Salesforce is already expensive, and those third-party add-ons are really expensive too. In terms of a sales strategy, for new CRM customers, we think that Motivator is kind of an obvious add-on to maximize the value of CRM. So for any company that's purchasing CRM, particularly if they have 5 or more users, being able to set targets and create these contests can really help them get more value. Like I said before, doubling their sales in very short periods of time. For existing CRM customers, it probably makes sense to send email to your clients to let them know that Motivator is available and it's an opportunity to get more value from the CRM. We already talked about competing with Salesforce. It's just a much better value, and it's the best way to get the maximum value from CRM. And then for partners also, I think there's a professional services opportunity because the customers need to spend a little time setting up their KPI dashboards, figuring out what are the key activities that lead to more sales, and setting up the targets and the scorecards, and then creating contests. So this is an opportunity for partners to be able to do some consulting. And in terms of some frequently asked questions, sometimes partners will ask, which of my clients are most likely to get the most out of Motivator? And as I mentioned before, for contests especially, 5 or more people makes a lot of sense. To have an interesting competition, you probably need at least 5 people. But for the targets and the scorecards and even the dashboards, that can be something that adds value to virtually anyone who just wants to track and improve their performance. So even small teams of 1 to 3 can use it. In terms of the licenses, I think I mentioned this before, you only need licenses for people who either access or manage dashboards, participate in or manage contests, or participate in or manage targets, and to be included in the performance breakdowns. And then again, when selling Motivator, it makes sense to explain what you're going to get out of this is increased activities in your CRM, possibly increased CRM adoption, and increased sales. So case studies have shown between 50 to 200% increase in calls, if that's something you're trying to motivate, or meetings, or activity reporting and revenue. And again, this kind of thing, these results can come in very short periods of time. In terms of other support frequently asked questions, customers do need to have a CRM account before they can use Motivator, because as I said, all of the data and the users comes out of CRM. And the first person to log in needs to be an admin. Can anyone create and manage KPIs, dashboards, targets, and contests? Only CRM admins can do that. So initially, we did actually have our own admin model, but we decided to simplify that for users. So anyone who's an admin in CRM is an admin in Motivator. In terms of managing licenses, I showed that in the demo. So you go to settings and users to activate users from your CRM org. And as we already discussed, Motivator supports all the CRM modules, including custom modules and custom fields. And if you do add custom modules or fields after the initial sync, you should go into the settings and resync in Motivator. And currently, Motivator supports English and Japanese, and we're working on Spanish, German, French, and Chinese in the near future. And finally, again, this is just a detail for partners. This is showing more details around how the pricing works. And as I mentioned, if you've added a couple users to a 5-user pack, as you go to your eighth user, it makes sense to just jump into the 10-user pack. And similarly, once you're adding a third user into the 10-user pack, it makes sense to jump to the 25-user pack. That means that the user now is getting a deal on having more users, and they can grow into it as they add more users to their CRM. Okay, that's it.